The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the show. It's been a very disturbing 24 hours. At the end of yesterday's show, and literally in the last 30 seconds, we go off the air at 2:59. And at 2:50, of course, there was the first explosion at the Boston Marathon. Eventually, a second explosion took place about 150 to 500 feet away. We now know that it is being called terrorism. It is being called a bombing, Lewis. And what we do not know at this point is who the perpetrator or perpetrators are. And a lot of information is still missing, but that is the reality. We first found out about this literally as we were going off the air, and it blew up, of course, into the international news story that now most of our audience has probably already heard about.
No doubt, yeah.
Video of the explosion from the finish line we have here for you. You will hear an initial explosion. If you're watching, you will see that to the right as you're viewing. Of course, on the left, on the course, the way the runners were going, to the left of the runners. And then about 15 seconds later, there will be a second explosion, which is just down the block. This is the best vantage point I've found so far of what went on. The first explosion. As you can see people starting to turn. One man, let me pause, by the way. If you see the man in the orange vest right now laying down, we have found out about who that is, and that's quite a story in and of itself. But in any case, that you can see him next to the first explosion, and then I'll just continue, and then we will hear the second explosion which took place. There is the second one further away, and you can just barely see it. There for a second, you can kind of actually make out that there is, looking through the smoke from this explosion that we're closest to in this shot, further down you can see another cloud of smoke. So that is what happened initially. There were some reports about a third explosion at the JFK Library. It turned out to be unrelated. 3 fatalities as of right now, closing in on 200 injured. I think 176 was the last official number I heard, Lewis, and that climbed steadily overnight. A couple of things about media coverage. Yesterday, there were rumors that started about a so-called suspect and a person of interest, someone who was being detained. And this was started first by the New York Post and Fox News, which is the same company, not very trustworthy information in many cases. But then CBS, ABC, and NBC News reporters all tweeted about it and also talked about it on broadcast television. And what it appears to have been is that there was a man who was injured at a hospital, and he was a person of interest. He was being spoken to, but he is not being considered a suspect as far as we know. That's the bottom line. You know, at the time, there was, of course, this rush to get information out, and unclear whether there was a distinction between person of interest and suspect. But that being said, the story right now is that there is no suspect.
Yeah, we know what can happen with quote, facts when there's mass paranoia and chaos going on, as we saw with Sandy Hook. I mean, even for the first week, there was almost no concrete factual evidence of what happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This was, to give some context here, you know, we're based here in Massachusetts, a little bit outside of Boston. This is considered one of the best days in Boston. It's Marathon Monday. The Red Sox play an early game. I've been in Boston on Marathon Monday, on Patriots Day before, which is a state holiday here. This really does hit close. I mean, I had dinner a block from where this happened a month or so ago, literally a block from where this happened. It's an area where and you always hear this, you should always be thinking that any place is a target. But when you walk around there, you just don't think that this is going to be a place where this type of thing happens. And clearly that was a wrong assumption.
Right. It's just common sense that if you want to inflict injuries on people, you do it where people congregate.
Right.
And I mean, when you do it on a day like this in a location like this, you really want to disturb people and make them afraid, because otherwise you could have just done it at a busy terminal somewhere or an airport. But this, I think adds extra insult to injury. There
were Sandy Hook parents in the stands. The marathon, because there are 26.2 miles in a marathon, was connected 1 mile per victim of the Sandy Hook shooting. And there were parents of victims in the stands who are all safe, we've heard. But imagine you're already proverbially shell-shocked from what happened just months ago, and then literally you're where there's an explosion. It's just incredible. And, it's easy to feel like we're kind of helpless, right? I mean, we had extra security at the Boston Marathon. There were bomb-sniffing dogs, 400 National Guard, law enforcement agencies, all there working together. And this still happened, right? So I understand this feeling of helplessness, but I think it's really important in these situations to have, you have to be determined to get justice, and you are empathetic with the victims, but you can't be so scared that you stay home. And, I started thinking about this. I started saying, I'm in Boston all the time. Hey, I'm in New York pretty frequently, and I really just don't think day to day of this type of thing. But am I now going to be afraid every time I get on the T in Boston or on the subway in New York? And you just have to remember that statistically speaking, fortunately, right now, these things are still rare. You're not going to, in all likelihood, ever come across something like this. And the goal of these types of things, whoever it turns out to be that was the perpetrator or perpetrators, the goal is to make you afraid and to get you to stay home. And do you guys agree? Do you agree, Natan, that that's the exact thing that should not be done?
That's right. And it is true that it's unlikely that it'll happen to any one person in the country. But at the same time, what strikes fear into people in the same way that the Sandy Hook shootings and any mass shooting or terrorist attack strikes fear is that you don't know when it's going to hit. There's no way to prevent it. So,
right,
like you're saying, the only way to really be sure, if there can be a certainty, that you're not going to be a victim is to just not go anywhere. And you obviously can't do that.
Even then, there's no guarantee.
And even then, there is no guarantee. I want to go back to that individual who I showed you in the orange vest, who was seen falling down next to the first explosion. This individual here, we've actually found out about him. And as you go through what happened, and you start finding out about a lot of the individual stories, and I'll tell you a few of them. This is Bill Ifrig, 78 years old. This was his third Boston Marathon. Now, when I first saw him get knocked down by the explosion, I assumed a piece of shrapnel had actually hit him. But upon closer inspection, it seemed like maybe he was actually falling from the actual blast wave.
Just the, concussive blast.
And that's exactly what happened. He was wearing the bright orange vest. A lot of people have been asking about him. His legs were totally swept out from under him by the blast. And a race official actually lifted him to his feet, 78 years old. He got up and he kept going. And he actually, he was within feet of the finish line. He got up, had a scrape on his knee, fortunately only. Some people had body parts completely blown off. Some people died. He was lucky enough, as close as he was to the blast, to only have a scrape on his knee. And even that was probably just from falling. Right. In other words, it wasn't even from the blast itself. And he said, as scared as he was, he crossed the finish line and then walked half a mile to his hotel. 78-year-old Bill Ifrig. Incredible story.
Yeah. Just pretty amazing that he's running marathons in general.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even want to run a 5K.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, before we get to the heckler, there was a cowboy hat wearing hero of the Boston bombings who is now under a lot of media scrutiny because people are curious as to who he is. He's seen in one video as coming in and helping people. He's in another video helping a guy who had both of his legs blown off in what was one of the most gruesome pictures I saw. And this is actually a guy, incredible story. He's Costa Rican. His name is Carlos Arredondo. He is easily recognizable because of the cowboy hat that he's wearing. And he has an incredible story. He's 52 years old. He was actually watching the Boston Marathon in support, in honor of his son, Lance Corporal Alexander Arredondo, who was killed in Iraq in 2004. Now, Arredondo was 44 years old. It was actually his 44th birthday, the day he was told that his son had died. He didn't believe it. New York Times article says, I just screamed. I said, no, it can't be my son. He lost it, he says. He ran into his garage. He grabbed a gallon of gasoline and a propane torch. He sledgehammered the government van's windshield of the Marines who had come to give him the sad news. Officers tried to calm him down. He covered himself in gasoline. He lit the torch. There was an explosion. The officers were able to drag Mr. Arredondo to safety. He had a bunch of burns, 20% of his body. He was at his son's funeral in a stretcher. Incredibly, 4 years later, his surviving son, who was then 24, killed himself, partly out of the grief of losing his older brother. And Arredondo had, after recovering in the hospital for 10 months, he basically became an activist protesting the Iraq War, saying, why did he die? So many people don't even know why we're fighting this war. The reasons we were told weren't true. And he was in the middle of this tragedy. And as you can see here, acting in a way that many people would have run away. This is an interview with him from just after this. You can see literally he's not shaken mentally. He is literally shaking and explaining what happened. Take a look at this.
No, blood everywhere in the floor. Was a big puddle of blood. And then all you see was people were limbs. I mean, rip off limbs everywhere. I mean, you see, and what happened, I guess, is the device, the IED, it went down to the ground and up. The gentleman that I helped, and I concentrate working on him by putting a couple pieces of t-shirt that I ripped off between the legs. He had a big fire going on in his shirt.
Incredible stuff. I mean, just the stories that are coming out of this are just unbelievable. And I mean, I don't even know what to say. Yeah.
What can you say? It's quite a situation.
Disturbingly enough, it took mere minutes for the conspiracy theories to start, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. Later on today on YouTube, we'll do a debunking video just to explain some of the things that are going on and to explain to people why they shouldn't fall into this kind of irrational thought process. But that being said, an East Coast correspondent for Alex Jones somehow got into the second press conference that took place with Governor Deval Patrick and a number of other officials. He somehow gets to ask the first question. This was 5 minutes before 9 p.m. Eastern last night. I was watching this live, and right away he gets in there and he asks, was this all just a false flag attack organized by the government to work as a pretext for getting in people's pants? In other words, frisking people. And Governor Deval Patrick just saying, no. That was his answer. Take a look at this.
Did you take any questions?
Well, sir, why were loudspeakers telling people in the audience to be calm moments before the bomb went off? Is this another false flag stage attack to take our civil liberties and promote homeland security? Sticking the hands down on the pants on the street?
No. Next question.
I believe that is the best possible way that Deval Patrick could have answered that question. No. Next question. There is not even. It's not even worth spending time in the middle of this explaining to you why why the question is completely ridiculous. But it is frustrating that guy got in there and got that first question.
Yeah, it's there are certain shady things that happen where I think, okay, maybe this doesn't make much sense. But you know what? If our government really wanted to impose the types of things that these conspiracy theorists are so afraid of, they wouldn't need to do this at all.
No,
it just makes no sense.
The last thing I want to touch on here, and then we're going to move on and talk about other things, is a former FBI agent was on All In with Chris Hayes on MSNBC last night, and he was asked about the logistics of the investigation, and he actually said, you know what, at the discretion of the investigators, when we have a suspect, and I believe that we will at some point, the suspect might not be Mirandized because we may have an investigation, an intelligence collecting situation that we could use our discretion and not Mirandize the subject. Now, I believe that this is concerning on a number of levels, but first let me play for you what the former FBI agent said. Then I'll give you my thoughts, and I think this is really important, Louis.
Right now.
The FBI is in charge of terrorism. Oh, so it will be an FBI-led investigation.
Which means the United States Constitution and the due process it affords and all of the dotting I's and crossing T's that goes along with them.
That goes along with it. However, that is not to say that intelligence collection isn't a big part of this. And the trick is to find that delicate balance. So, for example, if there is information to be collected by intelligence means, whether it's a sensitive source, domestic, overseas, we're going to pursue that, every angle of that. If it means that somebody's in custody and the decision is made that we want to interview this person without reading Miranda rights, because
You're
right
saying
now,
in foreign custody.
Well, even in U.S. custody, I think there are situations now where a lot of people would say, look, you don't need to read a Miranda rights right away.
Okay, so let's stop right there. I think that this is a big deal. I think that we already have a situation where, for good reason, there are concerns over the U.S. providing due process to both citizens and non-citizens who are in the U.S. and taking people outside of the country to circumvent due process. It's very easy to Mirandize when things are calm and someone's shoplifted. But this is when I think really the lead needs to be taken. The Supreme Court ruled in 1984 that mandatory Miranda can be waived if law enforcement officials are asking questions that deal with an imminent threat. This is like the public safety exception. I think that we don't know what will happen, right? They may catch someone right before doing some other kind of bombing. I think that we're getting into dangerous ground. I think that I understand the feeling, because this was so close to us, to say, screw him, no Miranda, let's torture the guy, and all of these things that often people fall into when you're in a heightened emotional state. And I understand that because we're there, right? But even if you don't have moral problems with doing that, you're potentially giving a basis for appeal. And you need to be absolutely sure that you're not going to have a situation where you get the person or persons responsible, and because you're acting in a way that is not consistent with due process and the law, you don't check all the right boxes. You don't Mirandize or give due process. This is your perpetrator, and now you've given an out. You've given a basis for appeal on which the conviction down the road, if there is a suspect and a case and a conviction, could be overturned. This is, we have to guard against a lot of these events even occurring in the first place. But this is a nation of law, and I think it's dangerous to discard those protections.
Well, look, those protections are thrown out every day when the FBI and the CIA are dealing with people who we don't know about, who are involved in terrorist plots in this country and other countries. We've got extraordinary rendition. We've got crazy things happening at Guantanamo and other government holding sites. And the only reason that the suspect in this case would get any legal protection is because everyone knows about this attack. Everyone knows that the government is in pursuit of him, and the government now is stuck telling the public and the media about this person. When
it would be hard because of the prominence of this to go around the law, because of what people would say. Whatever happened with that case?
Right.
I understand what you're saying.
But there are,
it happens. I'm not denying it.
Yeah,
it
hundreds
happens.
of people.
Absolutely. We need to bear that in mind. On today's bonus show, we will have more personal reaction to the Boston Marathon bombing, but also I'll be interviewed about this, and we'll actually have the behind the scenes of the interview on the bonus show, davidpakman.com/membership to get that bonus show and support this program. We will take a break. We'll come back. I have a lot of other things to talk to. I'm glad you're with us today. davidpakman.com/membership to sign up today. Back in a couple minutes.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Liberalbias.com refuses to have their theories and graphs dictated by fact checkers. Find out how you too can free yourself from the oppression of liberal facts by visiting liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day is Todd Saveland. Todd, thank you for becoming a David Pakman Show member. You and all of your cohorts, Lewis, who are David Pakman Show members, are doing a great thing by keeping the show afloat.
Yeah.
The number one revenue source is the membership program. Today in show history, what were we talking about years ago today on the David Pakman Show? 1 year ago today, we had that incredible story, the romantic story of Secret Service agents and members of the military contracting prostitutes while in Colombia. That was quite a story, and it's
imagine
amazing.
how that made the president feel.
Imagine how that made the president feel. That is a good question. 2 years ago today, a weight loss doctor was indicted for sexual assault of patients, including using vibrators on them under the guise of helping them to lose weight. Remember that story?
How could I forget?
What a bizarre story.
Yeah.
And 3 years ago today, this is just bizarre. 3 years ago today, we had that story about the Republican National Committee spending $2,000 at a lesbian bondage strip club and then sending out a direct mail piece that listed an 800 number, which when you called it, went to a phone sex line. Everything went wrong 3 years ago today for the Republican National Committee.
And has been going wrong ever since.
Yeah, fair enough. Here's another follow-up I want to do. We told you about this initial case some time ago, and we now have results from the trial. Lisa Byron is a New Hampshire attorney that worked for the anti-gay Christian organization called the, what was the name of it? The Alliance Defending Freedom, and we've talked about them before. She was found guilty of the charges we reported months ago of child pornography after she videotaped her own daughter having sex with two men on several occasions. Absolutely disgusting. Byron is 43 years old. She's facing a minimum sentence of 25 years after she was convicted by a jury. It took the jury less than 1 hour to deliberate about this. Now, on her Facebook page, she claims the Bible is her favorite book. And like I said, that she worked for the Alliance Defending Freedom. Now, since the charges, the Alliance Defending Freedom has basically said, we don't know anything about her. She never worked for us. They claimed in a CBS News report that Byron was never employed by the Alliance Defending Freedom, and she is completely gone from their website as well. It was probably just she made it up, right?
I really doubt it.
Yeah, I doubt it too. The Alliance Defending Freedom is a servant ministry seeking to transform the legal system for religious liberty, the sanctity of life, a.k.a. Anti-choice, and marriage and family, a.k.a. anti-equality. Those are basically, they're hitting all the buzzwords, Louis.
Right, right.
Yeah. So there it is. Videotaped herself. It says actually that she also videotaped herself having sex with her own daughter, which that's more disturbing, right?
The daughter was 14.
Yeah.
It's all around. It's
sickening.
pretty crazy.
Yeah. So we now have a verdict. We often report on the initial cases, and when we say, listen, it's all alleged, they haven't been found guilty. She has been found guilty, and there is a minimum sentence of 25 years there. An 8-year-old followed our friend Stacey Campfield around the Tennessee Capitol. Remember Stacey Campfield of the Don't Say Gay bill? He's the guy who wanted to pass a bill in Tennessee, state senator, saying that teachers just really can't talk about homosexuality. If a teacher is gay, which of course he probably thinks is very rare and maybe not even something that happens in Tennessee, but it certainly does. Teachers can't talk about being gay or about their partners. There can't be references made to homosexual relationships or partnerships of any kind, etc. That never went anywhere. But now Stacey Campfield, who now is refusing to come on this show because he doesn't like how past interviews went, said that he is going to be dropping a bill which linked academic performance to a family's welfare benefits. So the idea was the amount of welfare benefits a family receives, presumably a family that deserves welfare benefits, otherwise why would they be getting them in the first place, would depend on academic performance for children in the school system. Now, right away, we can see how this is a disastrous idea, how even though Stacey Campfield said, hey, listen, the requirements would be low, it would just be a couple parent-teacher conferences and a few other things, the mere idea of it is very, very problematic, given that we are trying to create a situation for children where if they don't have the right support from parents, they still get some of the benefits that the government has established for people in need.
Right.
And creating another way to separate children from those benefits is only going to put children in a worse position. It doesn't make any sense. That being said, 8-year-old Amira Fatuga followed around Stacey Campfield, asking him questions about why he was doing what he's doing, and eventually he did relent on this bill, although he says it had nothing to do with being followed around by this 8-year-old at the Capitol. Take a look at this.
You are so weak to not listen to a child.
Well, I wouldn't, as long as the parent shows up to school and even goes to 2 parent-teacher conferences and they're exempt.
You're targeting a very small percentage of the share.
Yes, and that's
you have to deal with this.
Children as props is shameful.
She's not a prop. She's a real
You are
child.
using a child as a prop. And good. And I want that child to get a quality education. Every child should have a quality education.
All right, so he says that you are using your child as a prop, and he is critical of that. You know what's worse than using children as props? Not being able to answer simple questions in a logical way. from an 8-year-old.
Perhaps. I mean, I have to say I don't like it every time parents put their kids up to something like this. I mean, clearly, I really doubt this 8-year-old had a firm grasp on this issue on her own and proactively decided to go talk to Mr. Campfield about this.
Natan, what do you think about that? Do you agree with Stacey Campfield and Lewis that this is not a good use of the kid, that the kid is clearly being used here?
Yeah, based on that clip, it looked like the girl didn't really know what was going on, and that whoever that was behind her, if that was her mom or someone else who knew her, was just using her to then, have the clip appear on shows like our show.
Was it worth it, given that Stacey Campfield dropped the bill?
I don't know. It depends on what the reasons for dropping. Maybe he was going to drop the bill anyway. I mean,
well, he would certainly have you believe that there were other reasons that he dropped it.
When you do use kids like this, it does get a lot of attention. But
does that make it right?
Does that make it right? I don't know.
That is the question for the audience. Let me know about this. Go to our website, davidpakman.com. Contact us. If this did achieve the goal, is it still not right? Was the child being used? What do you think? I'm really curious what people think.
What I'm concerned about is that if the case were a conservative parent having the kid go up and ask a liberal why they support killing fetuses, I think at that point we would be more likely to call it child abuse and not to say, oh, yeah, you know what's worse? Not being able to answer the question.
We absolutely would, because that would be a morally bankrupt bill that they're trying to pass, whether...
but that's treating the kid in the exact same identical way.
Completely. It's totally subjective. Absolutely. So that is where I'm framing the question. If you do think that this is okay, what would you think if it was the situation Natan described? Or are we just against using kids in this way, period, no matter what the goal is? That's the question.
Well, it's certainly not the same subject matter. I mean, here we're dealing with something that is not nearly as polarizing as these social issues that are really between a parent and their child, right? So it's a little bit of a different situation.
This is more of an issue between the child and the government and school.
And the parent. It's all inclusive.
Yeah. All right. I'm curious to see what feedback we get. I predict it will be pretty mixed. Let's take a break. Next, we'll talk to Matthew Filipovich from The Matthew Filipovich Show, and then still plenty more coming up. I'm glad you're with us today. DavidPakman.com, the bright green banner at the top of the page, takes you to our Indiegogo campaign. We're raising money. Check it out.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
And Matthew Filipovich, host of the Matthew Filipovich Show, the Boston-based progressive program. Matthew, great to talk to you. You know, we had scheduled this interview a couple weeks ago before we knew anything about the Boston Marathon bombing, and it just so happens that we have you here. You were also in Brooklyn on 9/11, so I think there's a lot of interesting things we could discuss here. First of all, how did you first hear of the bombing? Where were you? That type of thing, just to get that kind of out of the way.
Sure. Well, I live in the Boston neighborhood of Brighton, which is kind of probably the western outlier of Boston. Boston's actually a pretty small city. People think Boston's actually really big, but geographically, Boston's actually a really small town. And so actually the marathon actually starts way out in the western suburbs, 26 miles out, and then goes all the way and finishes in downtown Boston. It passes about 4 blocks away from where me and my wife live. And actually that morning we went down and actually watched the front runners go by. It's 4 blocks away. It's fun. A bunch of people come out and, cheer along along the route. This is actually, we're not that far off from, we're on the other end of Heartbreak Hill, the famous hill that the hardest part of the marathon where people are going up this insane incline. And so we went down, around 11 or so and watched the front runners go past where we were. And then, the front runners passed, and I went back to our apartment, and I'm working on my show for today. And all of a sudden, I actually saw literally like 30 police motorcycles zoom past my front window, sirens blaring, and there was so many of them, and it was so sustained. I actually thought that something must have been wrong, and so oddly enough, right then and there on Twitter, I saw that the fact that there was at least one explosion, and then like everyone else, we started seeing all the different reports coming in, some accurate, some not accurate, of just the horror that happened down on the finish line of the Boston Marathon.
So now we're hearing this morning from Deval Patrick and from the police commissioner, Ed Davis, and others about kind of the slight contraction of the crime scene area from something like 16 blocks to 12, but that really all over Boston there's going to be increased security. Expect to have maybe somebody on the MBTA police asked to look through your bag, all these types of things. So I'm curious, you were in Brooklyn right after 9/11. What do you worry about in terms of this rush to be more secure? Is it just a good thing? We should do absolutely everything we can, or are you concerned about it?
I'm very concerned about it. I actually was living in Brooklyn, again, like you said, on 9/11. I could actually see the Twin Towers from the end of my block. On 9/11, I actually had in the backyard of the apartment I was staying in, I actually still have this. There was a piece of paper, just a random piece of some office building up on the Twin Towers, this singed financial forum that ended up landing in my backyard. But what I mostly remember after 9/11, obviously, and it's similar to what we're feeling here in Boston now, is that fear, that sort of just that nervousness and fear. But mostly, the thing that bothers me the most, and when you talk about how the fact that they're going to be, doing more searching of bags here in Boston, I remember after 9/11 in New York, seeing friggin' military soldiers with M16 machine guns on the street corners. I remember seeing F-16 fighter jets literally zooming overhead like you're living in a war zone. I remember, obviously we all remember the stuff that came after that, which was the Patriot Act, the being lied into war. And I very much do worry about that happening here. It's not that people shouldn't be stressed out and shaken by what happened. Of course we're going to be shaken. This is a very serious thing that happened on 9/11 and what happened now. But we have to be very, very vigilant about the fact that there are a lot of not so good people who are very, very good at exploiting that fear. They'll exploit that fear for power. They'll exploit that fear for money. You have not only the military-industrial complex, you have the security-industrial complex, which exploded after 9/11. I do very much fear that that's going to happen here. I mean, if you look at the fact that they're talking about checking bags, I'm someone who thinks that isn't really going to help anything. I mean, it's not like you can you're going to check every single solitary bag as you're walking down the street. You're going to create checkpoints. Personally, I would say that's, if you want to create a checkpoint, you're just going to create another bottleneck, which would also be another target for a terror attack. I think the reality is these attacks don't happen very often, and not that when they do happen, they're not tragic and horrible, and we need to empathize with all the people who are victims of this. But the odds, we're lucky, most of people listening live in the United States of America. We are very, very lucky that we live in a country that, for the most part, we are safe from terror attacks.
Yeah, well, earlier I was saying that statistically speaking, these incidents are very rare. And even when you look at the incident, and I don't mean to minimize it in any way, but we have 3 people at this point who have died and closing in on 200 who have been injured. Statistically speaking, you are not going to encounter one of these incidents, knock on wood, based on today's status quo, if you're just going about your business or going to a marathon. But that being said, I think the line between security for the sake of either actual security or even just making people feel safe, which I think also has value, and then crossing that into exploiting the event to do things, which at the top of the list would be using 9/11 to go into Iraq, which had nothing to do with it. The line between those, there's a large gray area, and you don't always know right away when you hear of a policy which of those umbrellas it fits under.
Absolutely. There are obviously things that people can do to be smarter about about security. But I'm someone who thinks we crossed that line a long, long time ago. And after 9/11, if you look at the warrantless spying that's going on, if you look, and this isn't just things that happened under Bush. If we look at the Obama, I think all of this stuff can be traced back to just the idea of exploiting fear. If you look at Obama's assassination of American citizens, if you look at the drone war, if you look at all of that stuff, all of that is actually, you can draw a direct line to the fear that we all felt on 9/11, and then people, again, exploiting that fear to their own end. And again, some of it might be, I'm not going to, some of the motives are clearly bad. Some of the motives are just profit. Some of the motives are, some of the motives may be fine. That maybe some people may be thinking they're doing the right thing, but I'm someone who definitely thinks we are way past that line. And what could we have possibly done to stop what happened in Boston?
We've been speaking with Matthew Filipovich, host of the Matthew Filipovich Show. What's the best way for our audience to find you?
Well, I don't expect them to know how to spell Filipovich, so the best way to find me is MatthewF.net.
All right, MatthewF.net. Great to talk to you, Matthew, and we'll definitely talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, David.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the show. I want to thank everybody who's watching us from the We Survive Bush, You'll Survive Obama Facebook page, as well as the I Love It When I Wake Up in the Morning and Barack Obama is President Facebook page. In the context of the Boston Marathon bombing, the comments that I'm about to play for you are particularly disturbing. This is Sean Akers, who was on the Faith and Freedom radio program, and he's having a conversation with Matt Staver. And they're talking about a lawsuit that is going on because here's the background. A judge dismissed a lawsuit, which was filed by American atheists, which wanted to prevent a pair of beams that happened to fall into the shape of a cross that were pulled from the 9/11 debris from being included in the official memorial, saying, you know what? If you include that, it's kind of like an establishment of religion. The reality is that people of all faiths and of no faith at all died and suffered from the deaths of the victims of 9/11, so it really doesn't make sense. Now, the judge dismissed the lawsuit. That didn't stop Akers from actually saying that atheists are trying to finish the job of bringing down the Twin Towers. It's hard to think of something more offensive, particularly contextualized after the incident yesterday. Take a look at this.
If you think about the irony of what they're saying, is that one religion or extremists from a particular religion brought down the Twin Towers, but the atheists are coming in to finish the job. There's one thing left. The one thing that was left standing that gave hope, that gave inspiration to the people on 9/11. I remember watching it on television. That miraculously this perfect cross survived, and people got hope from that. But now these atheists have come in and literally file charges.
Right. So first of all, by the miraculous cross, he literally means these askew steel I-beams that were bolted together. It certainly doesn't seem like much of a miracle, first of all.
Yeah, let's go through the construction of a building. It's kind of like this.
Right.
And
Now, if the I-beams had formed a Star of David, I might be willing to reconsider whether some kind of miracle had taken place.
Yeah.
If steel I-beams form a Star of David. But that being said, surely if the cross had been upside down by coincidence, would that have been a sign from Satan? No, they probably would have just ignored the whole thing. So I find this very offensive, particularly when really they're trying to push Christianity onto an event that is not about Christianity. Wouldn't it have been, and if we're talking about miracles, wouldn't it have been a better miracle for the Twin Towers never to have been hit in the first place? Right. I just don't understand the reasoning.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the point of this is. They're attacking atheists as if atheists are a religion. You would think that people like this would still be making cracks about Muslims, but
apparently they've moved on to this.
Strange stuff.
Absolutely strange stuff. Also strange and sad. A Texas man, 42-year-old Kirk Franklin, has shot himself dead with his own gun at an NRA-sponsored NASCAR race called the NRA 500 at the Texas Motor Speedway in Fort Worth. He was 42 years old, as I mentioned. He was from nearby Saginaw. He shot himself during the NRA 500 Sprint Cup race, according to the Tarrant County Medical Examiner. He was involved in some kind of verbal altercation with other race spectators before this incident took place, and his body was found in the back seat of a truck, according to a police report. I just don't know what to say. You know, I understand some people are cracking jokes. It's the NRA 500 and a guy shoots himself. You know, this is suicide in many cases is a very different thing than what we're talking about with gun violence. And I mean, how do you guys feel about that? When someone kills themselves with a gun, does the same logic of it's just easier if there's a gun around really apply? I feel like with suicide, it is far more likely you're going to achieve one death if you're really determined to do it. Although, we have to say that some people may try killing themselves with a gun and try killing themselves with, for example, pills. And with the gun, it's if you hit the right spot, you're dead. Whereas with the pills, you might just not take a high enough dose or something like that. So maybe there is a distinction. These stories are tough. I don't like to discuss the issue of guns and when it comes to suicide. I like to leave those apart. I don't think it really matters. But I will say that even though this is sad and clearly there is probably deep depression or serious mental issues at play when someone commits suicide, I have a lot of respect for someone who leaves it at just killing themselves. And not taking other people with them. Because so many people like to kill their children, their spouses, their family members, people around them, and then kill themselves. But when someone just kills themselves, I say, you know what, that's sad, but you know what? Many people take other people as well. I respect that that they didn't take anyone with them. Natan, quickly, what do you think about Lewis's comment?
Well, I think it's probably indisputable that using a gun to try to kill yourself is more likely to be successful than using other methods. Not necessarily, but in general, it perfectly could be true. And even if that is true, I don't think that it's really the issue. The issue from a public safety perspective is to prevent innocent people from dying. So I do think that in that sense, it's kind of like an irrelevant part of the equation.
All right. I think we all agree it's kind of a separate issue. Let's go to voicemail, 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a voicemail about Rick Santorum's speech. Take a listen to this.
Hi, this is Noelle. I'm from Georgia. I'm a member of the David Pakman Show, an Indiegogo contributor,
Excellent.
And a crazy left-wing liberal. That Rick Santorum article actually made me furious. And I'll tell you why. My kids were supposed to get to hear President Obama. You remember back in September of '09, they were going to broadcast it to the schools. They got canceled because a bunch of conservative yo-yos here thought it was going to turn into some sort of Nazi brainwashing. It's the first and only letter I've ever written to the editor. I was so mad it got canceled. So, Rick Santorum, there's no chance I'd ever let my children go listen to him. Thanks, guys. Hi, Lewis. Hi, Natan.
All right. Member Noelle checking in. Great to hear from her. Also, the Eggman checking in. Take a listen to this.
Hey, guys. That fucked up Jewish guy who wrapped himself in a baggie on the airplane because he flew over a cemetery, I don't have any problem with that because when I fly, I have to wrap my weed in a baggie no matter whether I fly over a cemetery or not. So sometimes if I put my whole body in a baggie, maybe nobody would smell the kind on me better. Also, Dave, I loved your comments when you said you consider yourself Jewish for the cultural aspect only. Of course, I don't believe in God. That is silly. However, I believe in matzo ball soup, knishes, and wearing a sweater when it's under 55 degrees outside. So I love the cultural aspect of Judaism. Shalom, Sheina Punim.
Okay, I never knew that sweaters when it's 55 and under was part of the Jewish culture.
Sweaters are a big thing.
See, I thought it was those ugly Christmas sweaters were a thing. I didn't know that it applied also to Judaism. But anyway.
Well, they're kind of different.
We are driving towards the second half. We are now at April 16th of our Indiegogo fundraiser. We need your support. Please go to davidpakman.com. You will see at the top of the page a bright green banner. You click it. It takes you to the Indiegogo fundraiser page. You can see comments. You can see the different perks we have available. I am making an announcement, Lewis. In the next 24 hours, we will be adding a $10 perk level and subsequent levels will also get this David Pakman Show bumper stickers. Never made before. 10 people said, you know what? I'd throw 10, 15 bucks at this if you at least gave me a bumper sticker. I made a call. We have them in production, and they will be available. That will be an option for people.
Sounds like a good way to get run off the road.
Well, that's...
I'm just kidding.
I mean, maybe you put it on your Apple MacBook, right? I'm sure a lot of our fans have MacBook Airs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You put it on the MacBook, etc. DavidPakman.com/membership. Become a member. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at DavidPakman.com.